What's up everybody, Dusty here, and today I'm playing Clay Entertainment's 2013 cult classic Don't Starve. Now don't let the charming art style deceive you, as on its default settings, the game more than lives up to its name, and distills the survival genre down to its essential elements, with your only goal being to survive for as long as possible as you engage in the timeless tale of man versus nature. Or I suppose it could be woman versus nature too, since there are also a number of female characters that can be unlocked, but for this run I'd be going with my main man, Wilson. Now once you've selected your character and spawned in, you immediately find yourself being taunted by the enigmatic Maxwell, who lets you know it'd probably be a good idea to find some food before nightfall. He neglects to mention the importance of managing your sanity, or that being out at night without a light is literally fatal, but luckily this isn't my first trip into the constant, so in addition to foraging for food, I also make sure to scavenge for supplies and build an axe so I can chop down trees to gather wood, and a pickaxe so I can mine boulders. And my first day proves to be quite productive, as this was one of the few instances where I wasn't screwed over by the RNG and spawned close to an area with an abundance of gold, so in addition to a permanent campfire, I was also able to make a science machine, and the science machine would allow me to learn how to make even more useful goodies, such as a backpack to increase Wilson's storage space. I would also come across numerous tall bird nests, which could prove to be a reliable source of food in a pinch, although for the time being, Wilson would have to settle for dining upon morsels of moleworm meat. Over the next few days, I would continue gathering supplies and making improvements to my camp, although as has been the case throughout most of human history, my so-called progress would have some pretty devastating effects on the environment, although to be fair, drying racks and crockpots are absolute necessities, and if trees don't want to be burned to make charcoal, then they shouldn't be so flammable. It also didn't take long to discover that my base was located right next to a spider's nest, and while silk is a valuable resource that's needed to craft many key items, dealing with unwanted spider guests at night can quickly escalate into a whole ordeal, so I would end up building a second base by a little pigman village, although this turned out to be less than ideal, as it turns out there were even more spiders living in this area. But in all honesty, the spiders were more of an annoyance than a threat. I mean, yeah, they can cause some serious damage if they catch you slipping, but once you learn their patterns and behavior, they're easy enough to manage. No, in the early days, the biggest threat to Wilson was simply the elements, as he constantly found himself getting soaked during rainstorms. Now, this wouldn't actually have any effect on his health, but it would chip away at his sanity and drive him closer and closer to madness. And if that sounds a little overdramatic, then how about you spend half a week out in the rain, then tell me how your mental health is doing. Anyway, to counterbalance this, I smashed one of the pigman's houses down to obtain pig meat, which I then fashioned into an umbrella. While this had obviously turned out very nicely for Wilson, his newly homeless neighbor quickly fell on hard times and soon found himself getting into it with the spiders, and once morning came and the rest of the pigmen had awoken, it erupted into a full-blown conflict.
Why are you fighting? Can't you see you're all the same?
Oh, summer. First race war, huh?
Despite instigating this whole incident, I managed to avoid most of the action and take advantage of the ensuing chaos to obtain some valuable resources.
America, fuck yeah!
I would then use most of the silk I gathered to make a bug-catching net. Now, most Don't Starve players would probably assume that I intended to use this to catch fireflies so that I could craft a miner's hat, and while that was definitely on my agenda, the immediate plan was to piss off some killer bees and lure them over to another spider's nest so I could obtain more silk to build a fishing rod. Almost immediately after finishing up with that though, Wilson begins hearing things, and it soon becomes apparent that it isn't simply his paranoia when he's assaulted by a hound, although he's able to fend it off with his trusty spear and an assist from the pigmen. Looking to recover from that battle, I then start seeking out spider glands, and this is when I remember that utilizing traps is a far more effective way to clear out their nests, and once that's done, I put down a temporary camp so I can do some night fishing. Although before I'm able to get to it, I also learned that rain isn't the only hazard you face during a storm, so that's fun. I would cap off the first week by crafting a straw roll so I could sleep through the night and regain some much needed sanity. Now this is offset by the fact that when you wake up, you'll find yourself on the brink of starvation, but luckily I had a few berries on hand to fight off those pesky hunger pangs. By the 9th day, I finally got around to building a crock pot. Not only does this allow you to create recipes that increase the efficiency of your food, but it also removes the harmful effects of items such as monster meat and certain mushrooms. I also swapped out the science machine at my main base for an alchemy engine, which enlightened Wilson's mind to the possibilities of even more inventions. In the next week and a half or so would prove to be my most productive period yet. I built a bird trap which would prove to be another reliable source of food. I made that miner's hat I alluded to earlier, which made multitasking during my nighttime exploration far less of a hassle, and I burned down some of the plants that spawn near one of my bases, and harvested the fleshy bulb they were guarding so it could provide me with leafy meats. Now that might not sound that appetizing on its own, and it isn't, but if you toss one of those bad boys in the crock pot alongside some actual food, you'd never know the difference.
Where's the love?
And after having the chest of my second base fall victim to another lightning strike, I finally learned my lesson and constructed a lightning rod back at my OG base. Most importantly though, I would eventually replace my spear with a handbat, which is far deadlier than the name might lead you to believe. Spiders and hounds proved to be no match for my mighty handbat, although the fact that I had initially forgotten to equip any armor did almost turn out terribly for me during one of these encounters. Eventually in my travels, I would stumble upon the plains which contained the mighty beefalo, whose manure I would start collecting as it could be used to build farms, which would allow me to grow crops from seeds. So by the time I've made a tent and boomerang as the third week drew to a close, I'm feeling pretty confident. Oh sure, there have been a number of close calls, with a few of them having been self-inflicted. However, time and time again, I had managed to scrape by and survive. And no matter what, Wilson's belly had stayed full. In fact, all things considered, this might have been one of the best starts I've ever had in this game. However, there was one thing I'd overlooked, one small problem that could derail the entire experience. And that's the fact that the game has started off in the spring. Now why is this a problem, you ask? Well, see, I hadn't really been paying attention, so my dumbass somehow ignored all the obvious signs and thought that the game had kicked off in the fall. Which meant that I had spent the previous 3 weeks preparing for winter, and as you can imagine, all of my winter clothing wouldn't do me much good during the hot summer months. However, somehow I managed to get back to my farm, where I got lucky and grew a watermelon which was able to be fashioned into a cap to help Wilson beat the heat and buy me some more time. However, while I was successfully able to grow a few more crops, sadly none of them ended up being watermelons, and after a few days, Wilson's hat reached its expiration date, and without any protection from the elements, he would quickly succumb to the effects of overheating, meeting his end after a respectable 24-day run. I was a little annoyed, having primarily been done in by my own stupidity, but honestly, that's pretty par for the course for Don't Starve, and it'll serve as plenty of motivation for my next run. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you didn't, then I have no clue why you're still hanging around at this point, but whatever, you do you. However, if you did enjoy it, then why not leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel so you can keep up to date with all my latest content. Or don't, you know. Don't let me tell you how to live your life. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. I'm out.